Hey everybody, welcome back to Race of History. Today we're doing Epic History's Napoleon series, Napoleon's first victory, the Siege of Toulon. This playlist of Napoleon from Epic History was put together by a subscriber, Shakaya. Sorry, I'm sure I'm messing up the name, but thank you for helping me with the video. And we'll be doing this series maybe not all the way through because there's a bunch of videos, but we're going to be doing it for the next handful of videos. So without further ado, let's get into it.
An Epic History TV History March collaboration, supported by our sponsor, Osprey Publishing. In the summer of 1793, the French Revolution was entering its fourth year, and France was on the verge of anarchy. In Paris, political extremists had seized control of the revolution. They guillotined the king and imposed a reign of terror that dealt summary justice to all suspected enemies of the revolution. Hoping to unify the new republic, France's leaders had declared war on the Habsburg Empire. But the conflict quickly widened, and soon France was facing the combined might of Europe's leading powers.
So we talked about this in one of the earlier Napoleon videos, but France is in trouble here because with the revolution, they not only give really bad vibes to the rest of the monarchs in Europe, because now the other monarchs in Europe are looking at France like they would look at Russia when Russia had their revolution. They are scared to death that these ideas are going to spread into their territories, that they are going to be deposed, overthrown, and possibly even killed the way that King Louis was. So France is not only going to fight these outside forces by doing a stupid move and declaring war when they were not ready for it at all. They got extremely lucky that they actually had a badass in the military hierarchy at the time. But had they not, they would have been in real trouble here. They were in real trouble here anyway. Napoleon just kind of digs them out of this hole. But also, they're not just fighting outside forces. Because of how violent the revolution has gotten within Paris and because they are beheading everybody, counter-revolutionaries start spreading all around France. And so they are fighting this internally and externally. And they are at this particular moment they're treading deep water right here.
Determined to stamp out a dangerous political experiment. Meanwhile, whole regions of France had come out in open revolt, horrified by the new extremism of the revolution. In August, the Republic suffered a further, potentially fatal blow when the city of Toulon joined the revolt. Toulon was France's largest and most important naval base in the south, home to a third of the entire French Navy. But now, rebels welcomed their old enemy, the British Royal Navy, into the port.
And when this happens, the British actually take a grip of French ships. Whenever this transition happens, Toulon goes into open rebellion, invites the British in. The British take a bunch of French ships here, and so it's a bad situation getting worse by the second.
By Admiral Lord Hood, aboard HMS Victory. It was an extraordinary coup. Without a shot being fired, the Allies had crippled French naval power in the Mediterranean and gained a vital toehold on the French coast. All French forces in the area were immediately diverted to face this new threat and lay siege to the rebel port. 19,000 troops in all, but since most French officers had been aristocrats who were now fleeing the revolution in large numbers, they were seriously short of professional leadership. Their commander, General Jean-François Carteau,
Okay, so there are two superiors that Napoleon has at Toulon. At least I believe that's correct. There are two superiors. Those two guys are dumb, dumb dummies. And so they do not help. In fact, they are considered a major hindrance on what Napoleon's going to try to do here.
was a loyal Republican, but a court painter by trade with no military training. To make matters worse, one of his few professional officers, his artillery commander, Colonel Martin, had been badly wounded on the approach to Toulon. Antoine Salicetti, a Corsican deputy of the National Convention in Paris, recommended as his replacement a fellow countryman, a 24-year-old artillery officer who was passing Toulon en route to the front, named Napoleone Buonaparte, or Bonaparte. Bonaparte was a professional soldier, but he'd seen almost no active service. Nevertheless, Salicetti was impressed by his manner, and most of all, his politics. Bonaparte had just written a political pamphlet, a short story about a young artillery officer who berates his fellow diners for their disloyalty to the Republic.
Think about how lucky this is, though. Like, this is the biggest stroke of luck ever. They have military incompetence. Anybody that has any military strategic ideas or mindset, they're fleeing the country. They're getting out as fast as they can as the Republic takes over. And they're like, hey, we've got this guy I have this guy that I know that I think would be good put into the military hierarchy here at Toulon. And he's really great. He's really well-mannered. And his politics are really on the side of the Republic. Holy cow. Making decisions on the military leadership based on that is probably going to get you massacred. It is so lucky that Napoleon was who he was.
General Carteau thought it wise to accept Deputy Salicetti's recommendation. The great port of Toulon was well defended by city walls and a dozen outlying forts and redoubts. They were held by 2,000 British soldiers and sailors, 6,000 Spanish troops, 6,000 Neapolitans, and 800 Sardinians. Artillery would be the key to overcoming these formidable defences. But when Bonaparte was put in command of the artillery on the 16th of September, he found himself with few cannon, not enough trained gun crews, and a shortage of gunpowder and shot. With relentless energy and determination, Bonaparte transformed the situation, requisitioning unused guns, training infantrymen to work them, setting up a new forge and workshop, and arranging transport from Marseille of 100,000 sandbags for constructing new batteries. Through hard work, he was ultimately able to build his force up to 64 officers and 1,500 men, manning 100 cannon, howitzers, and mortars. Within days, Bonaparte had established 2 new forward batteries with good revolutionary names, La Montagne and Sans-Culottes, which brought Toulon's inner harbour within range and forced Admiral Hood to move all his ships closer to the port. Bonaparte also came up with a plan, one that would allow the French to bypass most of Toulon's defences and secure the rapid victory the Republic so desperately needed. Bonaparte argued that if Fort L'Aiguillette could be captured, which looked out across the harbour, he could fill it with heavy guns and shell the British and Spanish fleet at anchor.
This is basically the same idea historically of the Dardanelles, right? To get to the Black Sea, you have to cross through the Dardanelles. And so the idea is that you build huge forts on the side of it, and then basically you can keep anybody that you don't want from going in and out. This is kind of a brilliant move here, because you're either going to have to take all of the forts surrounding the city, or you're going to have to move the siege out towards the sea and block it from that way. This is a really smart idea, and this is what Napoleon's known for. He's not the seafaring ideas, but the artillery. He's a very smart artillery person. He knows how to use them in a way that can turn battles very quickly, and that's what he's going to do here. He's going to load up artillery, and he's going to turn the battle.
Admiral Hood would be forced to abandon the port and take with him the Allied soldiers that Toulon relied on for its defence. General Carteau saw the merits of Bonaparte's plan, and on the 22nd of September, French forces attacked Montcaire. But to Bonaparte's exasperation, while he'd argued for an attack by 3,000 men, the indecisive Carteau committed only 400. Not only was the attack easily repulsed, but it alerted the Allies to the danger. Within 48 hours, they'd reinforced Montcaire with thousands more troops and built a new fort named Fort Mulgrave, bristling with 20 cannon.
Again, his superiors in this battle are the biggest hindrance ever.
The position was now so strong, the French nicknamed it Little Gibraltar. Finally, in mid-November, an experienced professional soldier arrived to take command of French forces, General Dugommier. He saw at once that Bonaparte's plan was the only way to take Toulon, and gave it his full backing. Bonaparte, promoted to major, got to work, overseeing construction of several more batteries in preparation for the decisive assault. One forward battery was so exposed to enemy fire that men refused to be sent there. So Bonaparte renamed it La Batterie des Hommes Sans Peur, the battery of men without fear. And suddenly there was no shortage of volunteers. It was an early display of Napoleon's genius for inspiring his soldiers, one that would serve him well in the years ahead. On the 30th of November, the Allied Land Forces commander, British General Charles O'Hara, tried to seize back the initiative, leading an assault on the new French batteries facing Fort Malbousquet. At first, the attack was successful. The batteries were overrun, the French guns spiked. But a counterattack with much greater numbers, and led in person by General Dugommier and Major Bonaparte, drove back the Allies. General O'Hara himself was shot through the hand and captured. 12 years before, he'd surrendered to George Washington at Yorktown during the American War of Independence. Now he got to surrender to Napoleon Bonaparte.
Wow.
In the early hours of the 18th of December, in howling wind and driving rain, the French launched a major assault on Fort Mulgrave. The wet conditions made muskets useless except as clubs or with bayonets. Bonaparte led the second wave in person. Amid fierce hand-to-hand fighting, his horse was killed under him, and he was bayoneted in the thigh by a British sergeant, a wound that came within inches of ending his life and radically changing the course of history. Finally, the Allied garrison was overwhelmed, and Mulgrave fell to the French. Fort L'Aiguillette and Tour de la Balaquière were soon also in French hands. By the following afternoon, the French had 10 heavy guns in L'Aiguillette, placing the Allied ships within range. Admiral Hood could not expose his valuable ships of the line to such a threat. He had no option but to order an immediate evacuation of the fleet and garrison from Toulon. Small Spanish and British teams raced to destroy all the French ships and naval stores that they couldn't take with them. But amid the chaos of their departure, 18 ships of the line were allowed to fall back into French hands. A badly missed opportunity. Many French citizens of Toulon were desperate to escape aboard the Allied ships, knowing that the Republicans would inflict terrible reprisals on the city. British and Spanish ships took as many as they could, about 14,000 in all, but scores were drowned amid chaotic and desperate scenes. Others were left to face the wrath of the revolution. Republican troops entered the city the next morning, and executions and firing squads began almost immediately. For the next 2 weeks, about 200 were executed every day. Allied...
Okay, so a couple of things here. One, Napoleon does something continuously, at least in his early career, that is really well known amongst the really good historical generals, and that is he is on the ground in the front with his soldiers, right? You hear stories about this from all sorts of historical leaders, military leaders, that is. I can think of Caesar being in the front against the Celts. So this is something that not only builds the morale of your men on the ground for that battle, but they think much more highly of you going forward, right? You are basically accepting the same fate that they are. So whatever could potentially happen to them could happen to you. You aren't way in the back just throwing them into battle where they could be killed, but you're totally safe. So that's one thing. And another thing is, I talked about this a little bit in the World War I video with Germany, and the way that Germany was portrayed to have handled civilians in Belgium for blowing up bridges and things like that. This is how civilians are treated that are rebels or, in this case, anti-revolutionary. But if you are seen as rebellious civilians, historically, this is what happens. It is gruesome and unmerciful going back forever, right? By World War I, the mindset of a lot of countries and a lot of people had shifted to how you treated civilians in some of these, in some of the war situations and things like that. But this is not uncommon. Treating rebellious citizens in this way is brutally harsh and terrible, but it is not historically uncommon.
Propaganda later blamed Bonaparte for the atrocities, but there's no evidence he was directly involved. France's young republic was now fighting back on all fronts. And with the fall of Toulon, the Allies had lost a golden opportunity, a chance to stir up further revolt, deal a lasting blow to French naval power, perhaps even overturn the revolution. But instead, the French Republic had weathered one of its greatest storms, in no small part thanks to the remarkable judgment, energy and courage of one 24-year-old artillery officer, now promoted Brigadier General in recognition of his extraordinary service at Toulon. Napoleon Bonaparte had taken his first step on the path to greatness. And for Europe, 21 years of almost constant war awaited. Our sponsor, Osprey.
Alright, so that was Epic History TV's Napoleon's first victory, the Siege of Toulon. I will get to the next video in this Napoleon series by Epic History probably tomorrow. But like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys then.